Welcome to Shop Talk, where Brianna and I chat about what's going on in our businesses right now, what's exciting and what's challenging. When something exciting happens, we want to ensure we're taking a moment to recognize and celebrate our successes. And when things are challenging, talking through them to gather each other's perspective is often so insightful.
Also, we know that when we're going through any of these challenges, and you are as well, if we share openly, you know that you're not alone and that as business owners, we're all navigating this crazy journey together. So here we go.
What's exciting right now?
Well, if you are listening to this podcast and we are currently in your ears, you probably realize that the podcast is now free.
Da
Uh,
da da
I know. I feel like I need like a little horn, a little like band
da.
behind me. Dun, 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 dun. But yeah, that's new. That's exciting. Obviously, that isn't our specific travel businesses, but it is a new and exciting thing for Masters in Travel, which obviously Whitney and I are so passionate about, and something that just happened. And so, yeah, we wanted to kind of share, I guess, maybe like our thought behind it and like why we
Right.
moved in this direction.
Yeah. So I think, I don't know, you joined Masters in Travel, let's say something like 8 months ago. It was kind of like last summer.
Yeah,
And we've
yeah,
had so many conversations. And I will say that for me personally, that's been one of my like favorite parts of doing this together is that
mhm,
now there's just like, I just kind of opened it up and I was like, okay, podcasts, like what's working, what's not, what do we do different? Do we keep everything the same? Advisor accelerator, what do we love, what do we not love, do we keep everything the same, do we change everything? And it's been like fun for me to even have those conversations,
yeah.
because when you're running things alone, that's just you talking to yourself.
Right.
Mhm.
Ah,
I don't remember how this suggestion even came up in the first place of dropping the subscription, but when it did, it quickly became like a very positive conversation.
yeah,
Uh,
I think what instigated it or kind of just put it on the table was us getting really clear on what our vision was for Masters in
yeah.
Travel and what we
Mhm.
really hope to accomplish with this platform and with our audience. And there's something to be said for sure of having something that you pour a lot of energy into and also a financial like component to it as well in order to deliver this and to be able to have these conversations. Like, it's a lot of our time and a lot of our energy, but it also is a lot of our financial resources as well. And so being able to recoup some of that is a very nice thing. But when we started to kind of really nail down, hey, what are we trying to do here? What's our purpose? What's our mission?
Mhm.
What are we
Mhm.
after? I think we came to realize that ultimately the impacts that we wanted to have in this industry and the kind of like where we wanted to just get the word out there that, hey, this is a community for all of us and we're having great conversations. We want you to be a part of them. And we really want to do our part to lift each other up. Like, we were like, well, we got to get more people in the door.
Now I'm sitting here listening to you and I'm like, "Uh-oh, I know where this started." It's when we did our rebrand and people started asking us the big questions of like, "What is your mission? What is your vision?" And it started to become very clear of like, well, if you say that this is your vision for Masters in Travel and this is your mission, then is it in alignment
Mhm.
with that vision to charge for the podcast? And that really, like, put me on the spot, right?
Yeah.
I was like, "Ooh, well, shit." Because the reality is, I started the podcast in 2020.
Yeah.
It is something that I'd been thinking about for a couple years prior to that. It was not like a weekend idea it was something that I was like, "Oh, I wish we could have these conversations. I want these things to happen." And then finally I had time and I had brain space and I was like, "All right, let's do it and see if anybody listens." And business started picking back up. And I was able to see, like, as an individual in my little silo, making decisions by myself, I was able to see, like, okay, I really love the podcast. I'm getting great feedback on the podcast. Other advisors love it too. And also, with the time that I'm spending on the podcast, I could be booking 4 or 5 more trips a month.
Yeah.
And that's fact. Like,
Yeah.
that's just reality.
Right. Right.
And when you think about it that way, you think about the money.
Yeah.
And the putting up a subscription was never about making money for me. It was about covering the cost of what it costs to produce a podcast.
Right.
And so I think I edited maybe, I don't remember how long I was editing. There were so many late nights that I was just like editing podcasts, because what I learned is like if you record for an hour, then you have 2 to 2.5 hours of editing.
Whew.
Like it's always about double is what
Yeah.
and I like got fast and got good at it, but like it's double the time.
I'm really glad I
And
came
so
in after that point in the business of you outsourcing.
you are, because it is also like it's it's a lot of work. And so the very, very first thing I did was hire an editor. Well, there's an actual physical cost to that. It's not
Right.
just about my time or what I could be doing with my time. There's like an actual invoice that is received
Yeah.
that must be paid. And so my idea of the subscription was like, okay, well, it's one thing about my time, but like I at least have to cover my costs.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that was kind of like where the whole idea, and I didn't want to go into like, I don't know. That's just like, that was kind of how I approached it. And I was like, well, let's see how this goes. And then that was okay. And I think that looking back, I don't have any regrets about making that decision 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I think that I made the right decision in that moment at that time. And now, when the conversation came back around and we were rebranding and we were really digging in deep and we were moving past my cute little hexagon from Canva and like getting like a proper podcast cover, and like really like I never had developed a full brand and a full mission and vision and everything. And I think that this is directly parallel to our travel businesses, right? Like
Right.
you do what you got to do at the beginning until you are ready and you have the bandwidth and the brain space to like do better.
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
when we came together, we started having these branding conversations of like, let's not just continue the status quo. Like, let's take a step back. And if we keep some awesome things, cool. But if we tear everything to the ground, cool. But like, let's just start with a blank slate.
Yeah.
And so I think that the decision I made 2+ years ago, almost 3 years ago, to put up the subscription, I don't regret that. I think it was the right decision in that moment. And now we had an opportunity to make a different decision. And
Yeah.
this felt right in this moment. So here we are.
I'm super excited. And I'm also just excited because I know that the conversations that we do have on the podcast are helpful. They're helpful for advisors at all stages of business. They're helpful for just people to get engaged with learning how different ideas of how to grow and how to scale and what other people are doing and all this stuff. And quite honestly, like with anything in life, if there is something that requires a payment, that is, that's a barrier for some people, right? It's kind of like, oh, do I want to put my skin in the game here? And so people maybe, would listen to the free episodes, but then not be willing to put their skin in the game when it came to the paywall. And now that that is lifted, the hope is that these conversations go further and farther with people in our community and reach advisors who like have never heard of us and
Yeah.
all of that thing. And I think it will definitely help them and be a part and a tool that they use in their business on a weekly basis. And that's great. I feel really excited about that. I think something that people obviously they understand this because if they've listened to us, they know we have our own travel businesses as well. But the idea that it is something we're willing to pour ourselves into, our time into, our energy into to serve, I think says something about how passionate we are about this. Like we really care. Like otherwise we could be doing some other stuff with this time. So I hope
Sure.
you guys
Sure.
appreciate that.
I think it's also just overall impact. Because we can actually see the numbers of of our subscribers. And I have to say, like, can we take a moment and just say thank you to
Yeah.
everyone who has subscribed to our podcasts over the last 3 years? Because truthfully, without question, without those subscribers, this podcast wouldn't exist today.
Yeah.
Like the subscriptions are what enabled me to close the gap between doing it all by myself for 3 years to eventually bringing you in and to eventually getting to where we are today. So thank you to everyone who has subscribed. We see you. We appreciate you. We know who most of you are. Apple won't tell us who you are, but Spotify will. So
Yeah.
if you're on Spotify, we know who you are. I never quite understood that, but Apple won't tell us who you are. But thank you, truthfully. because the dedicated subscribers have enabled us to get here.
Yeah.
And now, in terms of the impact, sometimes there is talk in the industry about gatekeeping information and about, holding back the secrets to success. And sometimes when I read these things, my first thought is there's no secret to success.
No.
None. No one's got it and they're keeping it to themselves. There's no secret to success. It's hard work, grit, late nights. That's what it is. Second, we're not gatekeeping anything. But by putting it behind a gate wall, are we? Paywall, are we? Like, that's kind of the question I started asking myself, as I was always so proud that full transparency, pull the curtain back. Here are my spreadsheets. Here are my numbers. I want to talk about everything. I want to share everything. But then by putting it behind a subscription, I was like, is that counterintuitive to my own belief of gatekeeping? Right. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
like, wait a second, tear it down, like truly no gatekeeping. So I,
Yeah.
I actually don't think, sure, there are people in the industry who gatekeep, but I think that there are more of us who are super, super generous about just sharing and answering questions and contributing to the community. And so anything that we can do to lean in that direction, I'm excited about.
I'm super excited. So, yeah, from here on out, just make sure that you stay subscribed to, through whatever podcast platform you use, because every week we are dropping a new episode and they just run the gamut of interesting information, interesting conversations, helpful conversations, people we look up to, admire, like these conversations that we're having today between just the two of us, where we're really just open and honest and vulnerable about what is going on today that, is challenging or is exciting, like those types of things. And those types of conversations, I don't think is something you hear anywhere else. So I'm glad that they can come
Agreed.
here and listen to it here.
Yes. And this morning we sent out a newsletter about this, and our inbox is just flooded with so many positive responses
Yes.
and so much excitement and so much support. So thank you to everyone who emailed back to our newsletter. We really love that. I love like opening our inbox on a Tuesday or Wednesday morning and be like, well, the newsletter went out
Yeah.
and seeing all the responses from everybody. It's always nice.
Yeah, it's fun.
Um, okay. So what's been challenging over the last month?
Yeah, yeah. So as we were saying, we love to peel back the curtain and just kind of keep it real. I think, you know what, we're now solidly in April. And I think for many of us, this is kind of like the beginning of the wave of our busy people traveling season, whatever that's called. And so for me, it takes on a new level of stress when like the people are out there, right? It's kind of like there's the stress of
Yeah.
like putting together the trips and all of the, consults that you have in January, and that's the busy thing for that time of year. But then it's like the busy travel time of year and the stress that comes with like, even if we did everything right and all the prep was perfect and we worked with the best partners, travel is still life and life still lifes. That's not a real
Yeah. Yeah.
phrase, I don't think, but it might need to be one. So the truth of the matter is, when there's multiple people traveling and out, seeing the world, things happen and they're not always perfect and it doesn't always go according to plan. And I think when I start to see kind of like my phone ring, late at night, early in the morning, or getting messages about this, getting messages about that, like my stress tends to rise and I start to get a little bit more anxious. And I feel like in the last week or so, there's just been some really, I don't even know how to put it. I guess I would just say difficult clients, because it's not just, I guess let's make a differentiation. There are always going to be like things that go wrong that are outside of our control or don't go according to plan, let's say. And then what makes it either not so big of a deal or a bigger deal is how the response is. And so I think we all can see like clients who take things in stride or understand that, like, oh, wow, this happened, but that's life. And we're just going to like, oh, thank
Yeah.
you for helping us get past it, or, come up with an alternative. And then the clients who act like the world is ending because their life isn't perfect or something went wrong, like to them. And then they want to blame you and they want to like not be nice about it, and they
Well,
are
just an
very critical.
expectation of perfection is really unfair for
Yeah, for anything, for
for
anything.
anything.
So I think I've been dealing with a client like that this past week that has really just got on my last nerve, but also just
Suck the energy.
wasted. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, you see their name in their inbox, in your inbox or on your phone, and you immediately.
Your blood just
Yeah,
my personally
yeah.
for me is like my blood just starts boiling, like just rising up to a simmer.
Exactly. And so it's like, if there's going to be a transfer that's late for anyone, of course it's going to be for them, right?
Uh-huh.
And of course they're
Yeah.
going to act like you are not doing your job correctly because
Yeah, you're the
somehow,
worst travel
yeah,
advisor that ever
ever.
existed.
How
Yeah.
would you book us a transfer that doesn't show up exactly at the moment they're supposed to, and all of the things? So
Yeah. Yeah.
that has been my stress this week.
I'm
I
sorry.
am I am learning, I wish I could catch these people at the door, right? Like, show me
That's
you're
the hard
crazy
part.
now. Show me you're crazy.
Honestly, that is the hard part. I do not feel that I'm good at seeing crazy up front.
Mm,
Um, that is the hardest part. I think some people are better at that than
yeah,
others. So I could sit here and ask you a ton of questions to be like, well, do you do this in your final itineraries? And do you do this to make sure, but like, I know that you do. This isn't
right,
something that like, not every crappy situation is a learning moment
right. Sometimes they're
or
just a
like,
crappy
oh, I could go
situation.
back and improve like, I think there are a lot of scenarios where they are learning moments and we can go back and we can improve our systems and our processes and our communication. But what I know about you and your business is that like, you've got things on lockdown.
Mhm.
And so this isn't due to a lack of you saying, now it can happen that your transfer doesn't show up on time. This is a situation of like a human being not being a very nice human being.
Yeah, yeah, and
And
I don't
that's
like
just something that
handling.
you have to deal with.
I think that, like, it's funny, I think I was having a conversation with, Haley a couple of months ago when she was on the podcast. We were doing an episode, and she was just, like, saying how the one thing, and she's like the nicest human. If you're listening, Haley, you're definitely the nicest human. But like, one of the things that she just can't stand is like rude people, but also
Yeah.
like rude people to like people on her team or her partners or something like that. And this particular client that I'm talking about, that's the vibe, right? Like, I saw how he was talking to my assistant when she was trying to help him with restaurant reservations. I saw the kind of communication and the way he spoke to, and those are signs of people who are just rude people. And at the end of the day, yes, they're on their trip and I have an obligation to kind of like fulfill it to the best of my ability. But damn, don't ever lose my number.
Yeah.
Base like real quick. Lose it as soon as you come home because we are never working together again.
Yeah. And I think that it is absolutely okay to feel disappointment, to feel that things weren't as perfect as they could be, and still be able to express that in
Right.
a way that is respectful,
Yeah.
and not demeaning and not rude. Like, y- we're not saying don't ever be disappointed. We're just
Right.
saying like maybe watch the tone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
we can still speak and have a productive conversation. I would be disappointed too, or I would be like, I have had a transfer not show up for me.
Right. Same.
And I
Yeah.
had to wait 10 extra minutes and I, was getting ready to call the emergency number and I was doing all the things that we tell clients to do. And then he came and it was very clear that he did not manage his time well and he got there late. Like, it was
Yeah.
very clear. And it was not a perfect start to my trip.
Yeah.
But I, as the traveler, got to decide if I was going to let that to continue to ripple through my trip or if I was just going to take a deep breath and be like, okay, we're on our way. Everything is fine.
Exactly. And I think, there is this kind of like, I don't know if it would be tension, but like this idea of when people decide to kind of like take the planning, all of the things off of their plate, put it onto our plate, is it, of course, there should be this higher level of expectation of things going
Sure.
well and being seamless. And we take
Sure.
that on because, like, yeah, we're actually really good at helping that happen. But of course, we are also not in the business of perfection and we can't control all of the other pieces like to a T of like how they do their job and how they fulfill their responsibilities, and we do it to the best of our ability, but of course things just happen. And so there's yeah, there is that thing of like, I understand when people look to us and pay us and trust us to kind of make, I use the word seamless so much in like my
Mhm.
conversations and in my marketing and on my website. So I want the trip to be seamless. I really, really
We
do.
really do. We really do. That is what we're striving for.
So I am bummed myself when it is not. I just want, yeah, a little bit of
Yeah.
understanding and like, man, but yeah, like let's make the best of it. And that's kind of like, I think I was to the point of how it can look on the flip side. I had a client this week, literally just yesterday, who there's a mishap in their trip. They're in Italy. It's the beginning of their trip, and their guide for the Colosseum, they get a call while they're literally getting ready to go down to the lobby to meet them, gets in an accident and doesn't show up. And I'm like, really? Like,
So they got the call while they were still at the hotel.
yeah, because our guide was supposed to
Was
meet them
that
at the hotel.
the guide was gonna meet them there? So it was like, "You're still at the hotel, your guide's not coming."
He's been in an accident.
Okay.
Was he in an accident? I don't know. This is a story we have been told, and so we're going to go
Yeah,
with that story.
let's
But
go
I
with
don't
that
know.
story.
I didn't see the report. There was no photos sent.
But, like, was there blood?
Right, right,
No?
right. Could
Okay.
he have gotten up, dusted off his, he was riding a little Vespa or whatever.
I was just gonna say, was this a scooter accident? Because I've been in many. Used to drive a scooter as my primary transportation. None of them truly knocked me out of doing my job, just got a little few scratches.
Yeah. And so, like, quite honestly, like, listen, I've used this DMC in Italy countless times. They're not my like top tier DMC because it wasn't a top tier trip, but they're like my solid DMC, right? Like
Okay, okay,
I've used them plenty of times. I don't, it's not like somebody that's new to me or that I've had a lot of, mistakes with in the past.
sure.
And so, I feel like it really, for whatever reason, whatever the guy happened with the guide or whatever, like it really was one of those things where I'm like, oh, really frustrated, and also knowing that my client's going to be frustrated. And then it's on both of us to be like, how do we make the best of this? Or how do we kind of just still, obviously, it's
So,
the beginning of their trip,
was it
turn
the
it around,
guide
so
who
to
called
speak.
them or the DMC who called them?
The DMC.
And so then what were, like, the next steps presented to your clients? Of, like, your guide's not coming.
So let us walk you through how to get into the Coliseum with your tickets that are pre-booked, have been pre-booked. So they walked them through that on how to kind of like just self-guide their way through the Coliseum and make sure that they still had the opportunity to see it, but that is not the same, as we all know. Like, I I don't know that I would recommend just going to see the Colosseum on their own, but at the same time,
We don't
probably,
recommend it, that's
yeah,
literally the
yeah,
point.
yeah.
That's the number one thing I don't recommend. Okay. So there wasn't like, "Hey, we could get another guide for you this afternoon," kind of thing. It was like, "Oh, because the tickets are purchased and I guess they have to be used at that time?"
That's what I'm thinking. But even on my end, I was like, you know what? Is there another spot before they leave Rome where I could just go to town with all my Colosseum
Yeah.
guide options and
Yeah.
just say, hey, do you want to go back to the Colosseum? I'm going to make it
Yeah.
happen, type of a thing. That's
Yeah.
my, like, I want to do whatever I can within reason, of course, but I have in my head like, hey, I'm willing to, out of my own pocket or with the help of the
Yeah.
DMC, do what needs to be done to make sure that like we make a not so great situation better if we have the opportunity to. So that was my like go to. Hey, do you still want us to go back to the Coliseum with the guide? Let me figure out how to make that happen. Do you want something else in place of that we can kind of organize? Just as like a token of goodwill, even to be like, man, this was
What
a,
did they say?
they
Yeah.
would be like, "Hey, that would be really awesome." It doesn't necessarily need to be the Coliseum because I get it. Like they did go and walk
Oh,
through it.
okay.
So,
Okay.
it's,
Yeah, it's hard.
so yeah,
It's hard.
yeah.
Yeah.
In
Are
those
you
circumstances, I feel like this is, something that I guess we can, there's not a perfect way to do it, but in my mind, I felt this was a situation in where like, yes, this happened and it wasn't, no, we hope nobody's fault, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But it was a bummer for the clients. And it's
Yeah.
my understand, like it's just my thought process that like the DMC, I wish like would come with a solution other than a refund. They were quick to be like, we're refunding this, obviously. But something that would like make the situation better. In this situation, is on me to be like, I'm going to ask for this respectfully. I'm going to ask for
Yeah.
this. And they were obliging to the ask, right? So they were willing to
Yeah.
kind of be like, okay, well,
But it
let's see what
wasn't
we can
their
do. But it
offer.
wasn't their offer, which I would have wished.
So that is such a key nuance between supplier partners. I think it's actually one of the questions I ask in the Hive when you're
Mm,
giving feedback on a supplier. Like if there was a challenge, did they proactively like reach out and try to manage but also like make it right? Or was it more of like we had to go ask and then they were like, okay. And that like I remember those things. The hotels and the DMCs and the supplier partners that I'm most loyal to are the ones that like inform me of a problem, proactively go above and beyond to make it right. And it's not just a refund. It's like, we're going to do this extra. And then they inform me when it's all like done to the point that I'm just
right.
like, oh my God,
I woke up and it
you
was
handled it.
handled. That's the
You handled
thing.
it.
Because
You
when
will
I
have
wake
my
up,
business
yes, forever.
forever.
Because that's truly it. Because it is not that things will not go wrong. It is only that how we handle them. And
Yeah.
so when you do have partners who, and if you are of the same mindset as a business owner, like as we are, I think is kind of like the thing that's coming up in this conversation. Is just kind of like, I got to handle it. I got to make this right to the best of my ability. This is what I'm doing because I care about these clients and I care about this experience. And this is kind of like what we say sets us apart anyway from people booking on their own or just going, through an
Right.
online service. And so we have to show that. And I want to do that for my clients. And I also want my partners to have that same mindset. And
Agreed. And
if
we
you
can ask
do,
for it.
yeah, we
Of course,
can.
we
It
can
still
and we
happens.
will.
That is still like a win in my book, but it is not like the best win because I did have to push for it.
So when we see that, like, okay, something didn't go quite according to plan, um, the bare minimum has been offered. Like, we will refund the guide who they paid for and didn't show up. Like, yes, okay. Um, how do you go back and just kind of say, thank you? And also, what can we do to, you know, make this right? Because it's one thing to just read, like, if somebody booked a tour online and the guide didn't show up, a refund would be expected.
Yeah. That's the same as if
So,
they went
like,
to Viator.
yes. So, to your point, that doesn't solidify their working with us.
Yeah.
What solidifies their working with us is like going above and beyond in the resolution or surprising and delighting them later on of saying, like, hey, listen, you were such a good sport about that not going seamlessly. We wanted to surprise and delight you, here later on in the trip. Like, how do you navigate that conversation with your partners to kind of like go back and be like, thanks for
Yeah.
the refund, and also how can we
Yeah.
go one step further?
I know. So, like the way I phrased it was like, I appreciate you keeping me informed on what's going on. I understand that the refund is coming. Unfortunately, this is a disappointment for the clients. Like they were looking forward to this experience. I understand that things happen. I would appreciate if we could do something additional for them to kind of make up for it. And they were like, okay, let us get back to you. We're going to look into some things and we'll try and figure out something right away. And
Mhm.
so, you know, I wish it would have been proactive on their side, especially because, when I'm just kind of like talking through it now, I'm not a new client for them. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's
yeah, yeah,
also
yeah,
about
yeah.
keeping my business because it is not really
Agreed.
about, they're never going to see the Antonucci's again.
Agreed.
That's, a one-time deal and what have you, and their trip is going to be done. And I hope that the rest of it goes seamlessly. It is my business that you're trying to keep. And the best
Yes.
way to
It's a
keep
good
my business
distinction.
when DMCs are a little bit stingy in that way, like or like push back on some weird stuff that's like, a $50, $100 situation. In my mind, I'm always like, what's the lifetime value of the client that you're thinking of? You're
Which is
clearly,
me.
yeah, because I
To
am
be
the one
clear.
that does 35 trips to Italy a year. And if this is like just a point of contention for me, or I didn't feel like it was handled great, that's when the next, time I have the opportunity to use you, I think of somebody else. Because to your point, if it was like an immediate, like, how do we make this better? then that's when you earn my business for life, because I know things are going to go wrong, but I know what you're going to do when they do. And I feel really confident about that. And so, in my mind, if we do have any DMCs that are listening to our podcast, think of that. Think about that.
This is, yeah. So I think I've shared this on the podcast before. So apologies for sounding like a broken record. But one of the key things I learned when working at the hotel is that it's really, really easy, or not easy, but like it's expected that you're going to deliver a good experience, which is like what someone paid for. That doesn't create loyalty.
Right.
What creates loyalty, so whether it's between our clients and ourselves or our supplier partners and ourselves, what creates that loyalty is how it is handled when things don't go as planned. When you show us that you go above and beyond and you are at the ready to not only make things right, but then to exceed expectations and surprise and delight in that resolution and do far more than anyone was expecting, that's where loyalty comes from. So that's what we are hoping our supplier partners will do for us and for our clients, because we're all together in this, right? And we hope that they do it proactively. That's the best of the best,
Mm-hmm.
is when
Mm-hmm.
we wake up and it's handled in a way that was more than we would have asked for. But when we have to go back and be like, thanks for the refund, and also this,
Yeah.
that isn't fully maximizing the potential of creating that loyal
Yeah.
situation, right?
Yeah.
And it's same for us. So when I receive any sort of communication from clients that things aren't going as planned, whether it is a transfer or hotel or tour or something big, like this was a catastrophe. My aim is, how can I make sure they're safe, take care of what would be expected to be taken care of, but then I'm always looking for the opportunity of like, how can I go above and beyond?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's kind of the maybe point that we can get people to just analyze not only their own partner relationships, but actually how they do business for themselves, because I think that it is the thing that will ultimately like create that longevity of like clients really being like they trust you to do what's to do right by them, but to also be like, oh wow, like Whitney really does care and she's willing to
Yeah.
go above and beyond. And I so appreciate that, because like we said, like it's not like you have to, but it's going to make the difference if you do it. And they're
Mhm.
able to see like, you know what, like that, I appreciate that. I do think that like when I think through how to handle situations and how to handle like the things that are like, oh man, I wish this didn't happen. But how I respond to it, I think makes the biggest difference. And that's why at the end of the day, like if a client's like, oh, not happy with something or whatever, and like I can't get anything from the DNC, that is when it's like, that's my time, because it's my business. At the end of the day, we like we said, we talk about the lifetime value. Like, do I want them as a client again? Then $200 right here is not going to be why I'm going to lose them, so to speak.
Right. Right, right, right. And when looking for a solution, whether it's like we need to fix something and it's going to cost money, or we want to offer something and it's going to cost money, I'm always the first one to offer to pay for it or
Hmm.
to split it with the DMC or the hotel,
Hmm.
because I also want them to see that like I'm just as invested in this resolution and in this client's overall happiness with this trip, as I'm not expecting like the DMC to foot the bill for everything.
Yeah.
Of course, it kind of depends on what it is and what's happening, but I'm always the first to say like, hey, this isn't okay. I don't want this to involve the client. We need to fix this. Like, can I pay for this, or, take it out of my commission? Or, like recently, this is so silly, but like I had clients who like someone took their luggage at the airport.
Oh,
So it
geez.
wasn't lost, but like they were stuck at the airport for 4 hours trying to figure it out.
Oh,
And the transfer waited for them. But then the transfer was going to charge extra money. And I
yeah.
was like, absolutely not. Take it out of my commission.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yes, charge the extra money. Do not contact the clients about this. Take it out of my
Exactly.
commission.
Sir, because you had this crap
This
entry
horrible
into,
thing
yeah,
happened that was
you'll now
completely out of
owe,
your
yeah.
control. You now have a bill of 150 euros, cash or check.
Right.
Like,
That'll start
no,
them off good.
take it. No. Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, um, if there's anything to take away from this, is all of us are facing this. All of us are navigating these challenges, big and small, right?
Yeah.
When something doesn't go perfectly, see it as an opportunity to
Yeah.
secure that client and that supplier relationship for life.
Yep. Yep. Loyalty is everything. I love it. I love it. Okay, now off of the Debbie Downer conversation, what's exciting for you?
Um, I think what I'm most excited about right now is I'm making a lot of really great progress in mission delegation. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
I have known for a while that like the two final things that I have found myself thinking like this is taking too much time. Somebody could be helping me with this, but I'm not. It's not about not being ready to hand it over. It was like I was a little bit concerned about overwhelming my assistant. I was like trying to navigate how best to even hand it over and delegate. The two things are responding to new inquiries. I just find I'm constantly taking a lot of time to do this,
Mm.
especially when I'm saying no.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
which
It's
is
not
like
even
where
gonna
you
lead
should
you
not
to you're right, it's not
be
gonna
spending
lead
a
to
bunch of
any
time.
money. Like,
Right,
this is
exactly. But here I am 30 minutes later. Um, and booking. So far my assistant is supporting correspondence with the air desk, like payment processing when it's just a simple payment link from a DMC, trip protection quotes, and then confirming those when the client expresses their preference. Um, and so those are three really big things that are awesome and they're pretty systematized, right? Like
Mhm.
for the vast majority of trips that we're booking, you have flights, you have trip protection, you have a DMC payment link. So that's pretty easy. What I hadn't yet handed over was like all the miscellaneous stuff. So like the Black Lane transfers, the context tours, the Rail Europe train tickets, just like the Eiffel Tower, Anne Frank House, Van Gogh museum tickets, just like all of these miscellaneous things that come along in an itinerary that are extremely important, but absolutely do not have to be me copy pasting in all these credit card numbers and billing addresses, right? Like it just doesn't have to be me. But it was, I think, and like hotel bookings alone of just like, well, this one needs to be in Smith and this one needs to be booked in SLH. And then this one over here needs to be booked through Virtuoso. Like just navigating this whole, what are all these logins? How do I make sure I'm doing all this right? How do I know where to go? Just all of this I hadn't delegated. And this week was the week. I had a couple simple things and they needed to be done. And I was like, so you ready for Rail Europe? No time better than the present. You're
Right.
booking these train tickets.
I'm
And
wondering
so
why like booking wasn't a whole thing. Like why there was like a difference in like booking the flights, booking train tickets, like the difference in your
uh
mind.
so I guess maybe two things. In my mind, saying you're now in charge of booking feels like a
Big.
real big chunk to chew off, like
Gotcha.
huge. Because it is so many logins and so many portals and so many different things. And
Right,
I mean,
right.
I just confirmed a Viking cruise, and we all know that I don't like a river cruise, and we all know I don't book a lot of cruises. So even I was in the Viking cruise portal, like, am I doing this right? Like, because I do all the time. So imagine that like times 50 felt like a lot. And I think the second reason is that probably 60 plus percent of our trips are flights, trip protection, DMC. And
Mm,
so if I could get her doing those like clockwork, like, okay, this is how it works. We quote flights, we quote trip protection. They tell us their preference. I go do that one. Now the DMC sent over the link, doesn't match the deposit. Yep, process. Like she's got that down. So then now like adding the occasional Black Lane context Rail Europe doesn't feel as overwhelming in my mind,
mhm.
as opposed to like, here you go. Here's all the booking. Don't mess up. That's I don't
Okay.
know. How do you think about it? Because I think you must think about it a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, once booking was off of my to-do list, it was off my to-do list. So
And
I'm
you're
now
like, that was 4 years
yeah,
ago.
now figure it out. Yeah. Obviously, and like I said, I think there was like the what's the word? because for the couple of months that Ellen was doing it, because Kelsey was not doing it, it was a kind of like, well, what's your login for this? Or how do I do this? And of course, there's more questions because it's not as seamless of a process. But I think, yeah, I like the idea that I don't do any of the like yeah, I know that the credit card information is there but I don't touch it. I don't see it. I don't like have to do any of that. And so I think it's a good thing for you to be at that point of that whole chunk or like that whole task. It's not like a task, but then there's the subtasks. So some still belongs to you.
Yep.
Some still,
Yep.
it's just the whole task is now off of your plate. And that is a big one. It's an important one. So there's obviously that level of trust that surrounds it. But like I said, we're just continuing to move that needle back of like where your zone of genius is, where your time is really needed, where you make the most impact. And quite honestly, as long as somebody knows how to book correctly and you trust them and the booking gets done, the client doesn't need to know that it was Whitney's fingers on the keyboards. Like that doesn't matter to them. So
Yep.
yeah, I feel like it's a big win and a big step forward.
Yeah, I'm very, very excited about this one. And I knew that it was going to be kind of the last step because this summer I want to prepare to hire a second assistant so that we have like a little trio going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe the other reason I was holding off on just week.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can see that like she's maxed out, which is awesome. That means I'm actually probably a couple months behind hiring the next person. And so even adding more to that plate might have been like tipping the scales of like, oh crap. So now my next question for her is going to be like, if you could take one thing off your plate,
Mm-hmm.
like what would it be? I have ideas of what this third person should take over for her, but I want to know what she thinks it is and have her kind of involved in that conversation. And then I think it's like, okay, once that's taken off your plate, and I think it's going to be restaurants. That's what I'm expecting her to say. So if she like tells me, no, I want to keep restaurants, I'll be shocked.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but who knows what she'll say? I'm going to ask her soon. As soon as a big chunk is taken off her plate, then I will feel more comfortable being like, you own booking. From the moment clients say yes, I'm going to be more like be like Brianna. I know the credit card's there. I don't use it. I don't look at it. And then she is fully responsible and she owns that task. And so
Yeah,
that's kind of what we're working toward.
I like that. And I think I would say if I'm speaking into the whole like the trio aspect of it, that does seem like a good delineation, I guess you could say, in terms of like if you're looking kind of and even this is how Mary Beth was explaining it to us like if you are having your whole workflow like written out and then you have the three people but you're writing who's responsible for what if you even look at it from a like time you know of the trip planning process and figuring out like who's kind of like owning this time of the trip planning process where does
Yeah,
that live I think the those concierge details and what have you, they live in a certain place. And it's really nice to be able to be like, I work up until here. And then
yeah,
so and so takes it from there, type of a thing,
exactly.
which is kind of like how I like to process it and how it kind of seems to work seamlessly.
Yeah. And I also just think that like with two people and everybody's got to start somewhere. Like obviously we start with just doing everything by ourselves and we bring on one person. Like I it was very slow moving. So like first I would delegate, but she would like tee me up and then I would review everything and send. So she would like tee up the dining email, but she wouldn't send it.
Hmm.
I would review it. I would record myself like editing it or making some changes and talking her through like what I was changing and why. And then I would ultimately be the one that sent it. So over the last 2 months, she's just sending it and it is glorious. It is so amazing. I was reading a couple emails last night of like her corresponding with some really, really like favorite clients of mine. And they were just like having a little chit chat back and forth about like, well, this dining option and this dining option. And I was like, look at her go. Yes. I'm like, didn't even know it was happening. I had to
So
like
fast.
intentionally go spy to even know that it was happening. So that is like but I'm just very slow in that transition
Yeah.
of like I delegate, but I still have the final, whatever, to the point that then I feel really comfortable to be like, you own this. I'm not looking at this anymore.
Yeah.
And then with the new inquiries, I have just started this week of literally every new inquiry that comes in. I just voice record myself, like talking through the information and helping her see like how and when I decide it's a yay or nay,
Perfect.
in the hopes that she will start to be able to say like, hey, a new inquiry for such and such came in. It's a yes because of this, or it's a no because of this. Like that's what I'm hoping for.
And
How do you
she can say no.
I mean, that's the goal, is
Yeah.
that when it's a no, that she'll respond and she'll respond appropriately. Like we have 5 different templates
Right. Right.
for why it's a no, and that she will be able to know why and respond that way in a professional manner. Is that how it's working with Kelsey now for you?
Yes. So I think that this is so great because it's like well, it's definitely saved time. It also has made the decisions better because probably unlike you, the other issue I was having was saying yes when I shouldn't say yes.
I
So
do sometimes. I don't think I do as much as you,
not as
but
yeah.
of course, we all need a little bit of protection
Yeah.
because
So
we're
I
all
think
making emotional decisions.
for sure it was the time save and then it was also the best choice for the business. It was the both and. So, when the inquiry comes in, it's unless it's unclear, but I think at this point it's 80 to 90% clear on if they should at least have. And so the thing is, it's like if it's a definite no, here's our template. If it's like we need more information, here's the information we would need in order to know if this would be a good fit. And then if it's like a yes, it's like, the thing. And it's funny because sometimes I can still see the inquiries and I'll be like, yeah, I would have said yes to that. And I know she's going to say no.
That's so good, though. That means it's working.
I know. So yeah, from a time saving perspective, it's fabulous. And as long as like, yeah, she gets to understand it's mostly clear. Like I said, 80 to 90% of the time when we're at this stage of business and we kind of know the boundaries that we have in place and why, and we're able to articulate that and communicate that, it isn't usually very unclear. Um, what the answer
Yeah.
needs to be, what direction we're going. And so it's a really nice thing to not have to have that, especially the no's. And that's just time. Like I said, we're not making money off of saying no at all.
Right.
There's
Right.
no opportunity for income. There's no
Well,
ROI here.
none. And I think that the other part that makes this such like a heavy lift of like, oh, this is really hard to delegate or hand off, is because there's so much nuance in the budget component of it.
Yeah.
Like we can't just say I need X amount of dollars for any trip anywhere anytime. Like that's not true. Like $10,000 is perfectly okay for some requests and not even a conversation starter for other requests, right? And so I think what I kind of walked her through is like there are 4 main parameters that I like consider when I see a new inquiry. Number 1 is lead time. Number 2 is what do they want to do? What's the destination? And like what's my knowledge and experience with that request? The budget, and how do we know this person? Is
Mhm.
this a brand new client from like Google, like that just found our website? Is it a referral? Is it a repeat client that we know and love and adore and we will probably do anything they ask? Like who
Yeah.
is it? And
Yeah.
so those are the 4 parameters I'm kind of walking her through.
Yeah.
And then so she's started a new SOP and she's just taking notes of like, okay, in Italy, this is really what we want. But if it's like Croatia, then this is okay. And then if it's Thailand, then this is okay in terms of budget.
That's great.
So like I don't think there's any other way than to just like as it comes in, be like, okay, this is the budget we need for this destination this time of year, and just start taking notes.
And to that point, this something that I did this year because it was on my to-do list for like literally 8 months and I finally finished it, is actually I created, and these can be sent to clients as well. So they kind of serve 2 purposes. One is for our internal knowledge and understanding of like appropriate budgets for each destination. And then the other one is to actually share something that seems like it's concrete of, hey, here's what we do and why. So I
Yeah.
create like there's 7 different like regions or whatever, 6, 7, I
Yep.
don't know.
Yep.
There's like a top tier Europe, the second tier Europe, there's
Love
the
it.
Africa, there's Southeast Asia, there's all the things. And here's there's 3 different categories of types of trips. This would look like 4-star boutique with like, some whatever, all of that. And then also what I did when I was creating it, I found specific trips and DMCs to kind of like correlate with that.
Oh,
So here we
nice.
use this a Portugal 5-star, trip for 10 days. We use tempo. It was this much just so they can like also, oh, the Sullivan trip. This is what it looks like. This is what 20,000, you know what I mean? So they had that
Yes,
kind of like,
yes, yes. That's a good point.
so it helped me to make sure that like the numbers I was saying, like the ranges I was coming up with were actually true, like, and I could like back it up with some like actual trips of the DMCs that I work with and stuff like that. And also for them to see, hey, here's why we're saying we need X amount for Italy or for South Africa or for Thailand and
Yep.
why.
Love that.
So it's great for clients that I'm going to start using it for, but it was also good for our team to kind of just know this is why our budget parameters are what they are. We're not just randomly saying $10,000 and
Right.
no other nuance
Yeah.
allowed.
So, yes, exactly. So I think the goal is that if it is not a good fit, that she can identify that and respond accordingly.
Mhm.
And then if it is like a repeat client or a wonky request, or if it's somewhere in the middle, then she can at least and like read through it, let me know about it, draft a reply, but then like kind of tee me up to just spend a couple minutes and send it off, as opposed to spending 20 or 30 minutes reading it, thinking about it, replying to it, feeling emotional about it. So that, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
those two things kind of feel like the last big chunks of things to
Yeah.
hand off. And so I'm very excited that that is officially underway.
I love it. I love it. And this is just in time. You're gonna
Just
come
in time.
Yeah, you're gonna come back from maternity leave with a business that is teeing you up for success and feels just right where you need it to be. So,
I'm I'm really excited to come back, bring on a third person, figure out what that's going to look like, who's going to own what. And I mean, this is our conversation with Mary Beth today, and our master hour was all about delegating and systems and teams and how much like you can't afford not to have help. And that's exactly what I've seen is that like I never did a proper time study, but like if I had to guesstimate the time I spent on a trip before having an assistant, it's got to be 30 to 40 hours total.
whew,
Like literally when I didn't have an assistant and like
yeah,
me putting everything into Travify, researching the proposal, making the invoice, like literally everything when it's just you,
yeah,
total from start to finish, it's got to be. It's got to be. And now that I've had Tori, again, I haven't done like a proper time study, but I would say I'm down to 15 hours.
yeah,
I mean, she has taken a tremendous amount off. And then getting these things off, my goal is to spend 10 hours per trip or less.
less.
And that's including the consultation, including like, my proposal delivery videos, and
Hmm.
then the pre-departure videos where I tell them where to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, that you're yeah, 10 hours, yeah.
For anybody, that's an inside joke. Brianna makes fun of me and says I tell my clients where to go to the bathroom. I do not, but I do provide a lot of detail.
A lot of and her
Yeah,
clients
my
love
goal
her
is
for it.
10 hours per trip, because then how many trips can you plan in a year when you're only spending 10 hours per trip?
A lot,
A lot.
I
A lot
think.
more than when you're spending 40 hours a trip.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Theoretically, you can plan 4 times more trips.
Yeah. Well, that would
So,
be exciting.
yes.
Oh,
Awesome.
all right.
Awesome. Good chat.
Well, yes, thank you for joining us on this month's Shop Talk. Um, I look forward to seeing you in a month, chatting again, what life looks like then.
It will be different,
It
that's
will
for
be
sure.
different. It will be different. Yep. All
See
right.
you soon.
See you soon.